A gunshot echoed through the dusty plains of northern Nevada as Natalie Moore clutched her swollen belly, trembling beneath the small awning of Goldfield Station. The summer of 1876 had brought nothing but heartache since her husband's death 3 months prior, and now, 8 months pregnant and abandoned by the family who had disowned her for marrying beneath her station, she watched her last hope. The eastbound train disappear into the horizon without her. The setting sun cast long shadows across the wooden platform as Natalie slumped onto her single trunk, her legs giving way beneath her. The station agent had locked up for the night, leaving her alone with nothing but the whistling desert wind and the crushing reality of her situation. Her funds had been stolen on the journey west, and without the money for a ticket, she was stranded in a town where she knew no one. "Madam, you all right there?" The voice startled her. A tall figure approached from the direction of the stables, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. As he drew closer, the fading light revealed kind eyes set in a sun-weathered face. He couldn't have been much older than her 22 years, though experience had clearly marked him. "I'm fine," she lied, brushing away tears with the back of her hand. "Don't look fine to me," he said, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Name's Levi Shaw. I work at the Silver Dollar Ranch just north of town." Natalie attempted to stand, propriety demanding she introduce herself properly, but a sharp pain across her abdomen caused her to gasp. Levi's hand shot out to steady her. "How far along are you?" he asked, nodding toward her belly. 8 months, she whispered. "My husband. He died in a mining accident back in Colorado." The cowboy's face softened. "And you're heading where exactly?" "Nowhere, apparently." Natalie couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "My ticket money was stolen, and the station agent said there won't be another train for a week." Levi glanced at the darkening sky, then back to her face. "You got family waiting somewhere?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." Something in his expression shifted, then a decisive look crossed his features as he straightened his back. "Well, Miss Moore, Natalie Moore. Miss Moore, I can't leave a woman in your condition out here alone. There's a boarding house in town where you can stay tonight, and tomorrow we can figure out what to do next." Natalie stared at him, suspicion warring with desperation. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Levi Shaw tipped his hat back slightly, revealing more of his face in the last rays of sunlight. A scar ran along his jawline, but his eyes held no malice, only a straightforward honesty that Natalie hadn't encountered since her husband's passing. "My ma raised me better than to leave someone in need, especially—" He nodded toward her belly again. "That little one deserves a fighting chance, same as anyone." The baby kicked then, as if in agreement, and Natalie placed a protective hand over her stomach. "I have no way to repay you, Mr. Shaw." "Wasn't asking for payment." He reached for her trunk. "Can you walk? The boarding house isn't far." With his support, Natalie made her way slowly down the main street of Goldfield. The town was livelier than she'd expected, with saloons doing brisk business and the sounds of a piano drifting into the evening air. Several passers-by glanced curiously at them, but Levi kept them moving toward a modest 2-story building, with a sign reading, "Mrs. Holloway's Boarding House." The proprietress, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, regarded Natalie with open skepticism, but softened when Levi explained the situation. "I'll pay for a week," he said, placing coins on the counter before Natalie could protest, "and see about getting her some proper meals." "That's generous of you, Mr. Shaw," Mrs. Holloway said, her eyebrows raised as she collected the money. "Room at the top of the stairs, has a nice view of the mountains." After seeing Natalie settled in the small but clean room, Levi paused at the doorway. "I'll come by tomorrow morning, try to get some rest." "Mr. Shaw," Natalie called as he turned to leave, "I don't understand why you're doing this." He was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on the doorframe. "Let's just say, I know what it's like to be alone when the world turns its back on you." With that, he tipped his hat and disappeared down the hallway. That night, Natalie slept in a real bed for the first time in weeks. Her dreams were troubled images of her husband's broken body pulled from the mine shaft, her father's cold dismissal when she'd begged for help, and strange new visions of a faceless child calling for her. She woke with the dawn, her nightgown damp with sweat. True to his word, Levi arrived as morning light spilled through the curtains. He brought fresh bread, cheese, and a small jar of preserves. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the items on the small table by the window. Natalie hadn't realized how famished she was until the aroma hit her. "Thank you," she said, embarrassed by how quickly she reached for the food. "Eat," he encouraged, taking a seat across from her. "We need to talk about what comes next." Between bites, Natalie explained her situation more fully. She'd been traveling west to San Francisco, where her husband had a cousin who'd offered them work before his accident. With the cousin unaware of her husband's death and her own predicament, and no address to write to, that door had closed. "I had hoped to find work as a teacher," she admitted. "I was educated at a good school in Boston before I married." Levi nodded thoughtfully. "Goldfield's growing fast with the silver strikes. Might be they need a teacher, but no one will hire a woman about to give birth," Natalie finished for him, "and certainly not a widow with no connections." "There's work at the ranch," Levi said after a pause. "The owner's wife has been looking for help with the house since their last housekeeper left to get married." Natalie stared at him. "You're offering me employment?" "I'm offering you a chance," he corrected. "Mrs. Blackwell is fair, and there'd be a roof over your head. After the baby comes, you could look for teaching work if you still want to." The proposition seemed too good to be true. "And what would Mr. Blackwell say about hiring a pregnant widow?" "That's the thing about Josiah Blackwell. He lets his wife run the house however she sees fit, long as the ranch turns a profit." Levi's mouth quirked into a half smile. "And it does. Silver Dollar's one of the most successful spreads in Nevada." Natalie considered her options, which were painfully few. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Shaw?" Levi's expression grew serious. "When I saw you there at the station, something just—" He searched for the words. "I know what it's like to have no one to turn to. And that baby." He nodded toward her belly. "I lost my own ma when she was birthing my little brother. Both of them died because there was no one there to help." The raw honesty in his voice made Natalie's throat tighten. "I'm sorry for your loss." He acknowledged her words with a slight nod. "So, what do you say? Want to meet Mrs. Blackwell?" With few alternatives, Natalie agreed. After a modest breakfast, Levi arranged for a wagon to transport them to Silver Dollar Ranch. The journey took nearly 2 hours over rough terrain, and Natalie found herself gripping the seat as the wagon bounced along. Levi drove carefully, slowing over the worst patches. "Not much further," he assured her, as they crested a hill, revealing a sprawling valley below. The ranch house stood prominently in the distance, surrounded by several outbuildings and corrals where horses milled about. As they approached, Natalie felt increasingly nervous. What if Mrs. Blackwell took one look at her condition and turned her away? What if Levi Shaw, "I was beginning to think you'd run off to California," a woman's voice called out as they pulled up to the main house. She appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on an apron, her dark hair showing streaks of gray at the temples. "Just got held up in town, Mrs. Blackwell," Levi replied, helping Natalie down from the wagon. "This here is Miss Natalie Moore. She's looking for work, and I thought of you mentioning needing help around the house." Mrs. Blackwell's keen eyes assessed Natalie quickly, lingering on her swollen belly. Instead of the disapproval Natalie expected, the woman's face softened. "How far along are you, dear?" "About 8 months, madam." "And the father?" "My husband died 3 months ago in a mining accident." Mrs. Blackwell nodded slowly. "Come inside, both of you. It's too hot to stand about in the yard." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly elegant, with polished wooden floors and sturdy furniture that spoke of prosperity. Mrs. Blackwell, who insisted Natalie call her Margaret, led them to a comfortable sitting room and rang a small bell. A young Mexican girl appeared, and Margaret requested tea. "Now then," she said once they were seated, "Levi says you're looking for work. What skills do you have, Miss Moore?" "I'm educated, madam. I can read, write, and do figures. I taught briefly at a school in Boston before I married. I can also cook, clean, and sew. My mother insisted I learn domestic skills despite my education." Margaret seemed pleased by this information. "And what brings you to Nevada, of all places?" Natalie explained her situation again. The journey to San Francisco cut short, the theft of her money, being stranded at Goldfield Station. "And that's where Levi found you?" Margaret's gaze shifted to the cowboy. who sat somewhat uncomfortably in a plush armchair. "Yes, madam. Couldn't leave her there with night coming on." Margaret studied him for a moment before turning back to Natalie. "My husband and I have been blessed with good fortune, Miss Moore. Silver Dollar has prospered when many other ranches have failed. I believe in sharing those blessings when we can." She set her teacup down decisively. "I can offer you room and board, plus a small wage. The work won't be too strenuous managing the household accounts, helping with meals, light cleaning. The heavier work is handled by Rosa and Elena." She nodded toward the door where the young Mexican girl had disappeared. "That's very generous," Natalie said, hardly believing her luck. "There's one condition," Margaret added. "You'll need proper care when your time comes. Doc Wilson visits the ranch once a month, and I want him to examine you. He's due next week. I'm grateful for your kindness, Mrs. Blackwell." "Margaret, please." She rose from her chair. "Levi, show Miss Moore to the guest room in the east wing. Rosa will help her get settled." As they followed Margaret's instructions, Natalie whispered to Levi, "She's not what I expected." "The Blackwells are good people," he replied. "Lost their only son in the war. Think it changed how they see things." The guest room was spacious and airy, with a large window overlooking the distant mountains. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, with a washstand and dresser completing the furnishings. It was more luxury than Natalie had experienced since leaving her father's house in Boston. "I'll let you rest," Levi said, lingering at the doorway. "I'm usually out with the cattle, but if you need anything, just ask for me." Natalie wanted to thank him properly, to express the depth of her gratitude, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply said, "You've saved us, Mr. Shaw, my baby and me. I won't forget that." Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion Natalie couldn't quite name. "Get some rest, Miss Moore. You're safe now." The following days passed in a blur of adjustment. Margaret eased Natalie into her duties, conscious of her condition. The household accounts were in disarray, giving Natalie an opportunity to prove her worth. By the end of her first week, she had organized the ledgers and identified several discrepancies that had been costing the ranch money. "You have a good head for numbers," Margaret commented, reviewing Natalie's work. "Josiah will be impressed when he returns from Sacramento." Natalie saw little of Levi during this time. The ranch hands ate separately from the main house, and his duties kept him in the fields from dawn to dusk. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of him from her window, his tall figure astride a chestnut horse, directing other cowboys as they moved cattle between pastures. One evening, as Natalie sat on the porch enjoying the cool night air, Levi appeared, hat in hand. "Evening, Miss Moore. How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you." She gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Please, join me." He hesitated before taking a seat, placing his hat on his knee. "Mrs. Blackwell seems pleased with your work." "She's been very kind." Natalie rested a hand on her belly. "The baby's been active today. I think it approves of our new home." Levi's eyes followed her movement. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering uncertainly. Surprised, Natalie nodded, guiding his calloused palm to where the baby was kicking. His expression transformed when he felt the movement wonder, and something like longing crossed his features. "That's something," he murmured. "Strong little one you've got there." "James was convinced it would be a boy," Natalie said softly, referring to her late husband. "He had all sorts of plans teaching him to fish, to ride." Levi withdrew his hand slowly. "Your husband sounds like he was a good man." "He was. Not wealthy or educated like my father wanted for me, but kind and hard-working." Natalie smiled sadly. "We were only married 14 months before the accident." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. Finally, Levi spoke again. "That day at the station, when I saw you sitting there alone," he trailed off, then started again. "I didn't plan to say what I did, it just came out." "What did you say?" Natalie asked, confused. Levi looked slightly embarrassed. "When I was helping you into Mrs. Holloway's, you were half asleep. You were worried about the baby having no father, and I said—" He cleared his throat. "I said I'd be father to your child if it came to that." Natalie's breath caught. She had no memory of this conversation, exhausted as she'd been that night. "I shouldn't have presumed," Levi continued quickly. I just wanted you to know you weren't alone anymore. Before Natalie could respond, Rosa appeared at the door, announcing that dinner was ready. The moment broken, Levi stood and placed his hat back on his head. I should get back to the bunkhouse. Good night, Miss Moore. Natalie, she corrected him softly. Please, call me Natalie. He nodded once. Good night, Natalie. The week passed, and as promised, Doc Wilson arrived at Silver Dollar Ranch. He was a gruff man in his 60s with thick spectacles and a no-nonsense manner, but his hands were gentle as he examined Natalie. Baby's positioned well, he announced, helping Natalie sit up afterward. You're healthy, which is good. First child? Yes, doctor. He made some notes in a small book. You'll need someone with you when the time comes. Birthing's not something to face alone. I'll be with her, Margaret said firmly from the doorway, and we can send for you if there are complications. Doc Wilson nodded. I'll leave some medicines, just in case. Keep walking daily, but don't overexert yourself. After he left, Margaret sat beside Natalie on the bed. You don't need to worry. I've helped deliver babies before, including several of our ranch hands' wives. Natalie squeezed the older woman's hand gratefully. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. You already are, Margaret replied. The ranch ledgers haven't been this organized in years, and it's nice having a young woman around the house again. Her expression grew wistful. Josiah and I had hoped for a daughter after our son, but it wasn't to be. That evening at dinner, Josiah Blackwell returned from his business in Sacramento. He was a tall, imposing man with a full beard streaked with silver, but his manner was courteous as Margaret introduced Natalie. My wife tells me you've already made yourself indispensable, he said, serving himself from a platter of roast beef. Says you found we've been overcharged by the mercantile in town for months. Yes, sir. They were adding an extra 10% to each order. Josiah chuckled. Well, that stops now. I appreciate sharp eyes and a sharper mind, Miss Moore. As they ate, Josiah shared news from Sacramento political developments, railroad expansions, and gossip from other ranchers. Natalie found herself drawn into the conversation, offering insights from her Eastern perspective that seemed to interest the Blackwells. You know, Josiah said thoughtfully, Goldfield's been talking about establishing a proper school. Currently, Pastor Wheeler's wife teaches the children in the church 3 days a week, but the town's growing. They'll need a real teacher soon. Natalie's pulse quickened. Do you think they would consider someone like me? A widow with a child? Josiah considered. Some might object, but I sit on the town council. If you're still interested after the baby comes, I could speak for you. Hope blossomed in Natalie's chest. A teaching position would provide independence, a way to support herself and her child without relying on charity. Later that night, unable to sleep, Natalie wandered onto the porch again. To her surprise, Levi was there, smoking a cigarette. He quickly extinguished it when he saw her. Shouldn't you be resting? He asked, concern evident in his voice. The baby's restless tonight, she explained, easing herself onto the porch swing. Sometimes walking or rocking helps. Levi gently set the swing in motion. Mr. Blackwell get back all right? Yes, he mentioned Goldfield might establish a proper school soon. That so? Levi leaned against the porch railing. You thinking of applying? Natalie nodded. Mr. Blackwell offered to recommend me to the town council after the baby arrives. That'd be good. You'd be a fine teacher. He paused, then added, though we'd miss you here at the ranch. Would you? Natalie asked, studying his face in the moonlight. Levi met her gaze directly. I would. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had put into words. But before they could explore it further, the baby gave a particularly strong kick that made Natalie gasp. Levi was at her side instantly. Are you all right? Should I get Mrs. Blackwell? No, it's fine, she assured him, laughing a little. Just a very enthusiastic kick. Here. She took his hand and placed it on her belly again. His touch lingered longer this time, his expression softening as he felt the life beneath his palm. Amazing, he murmured. Levi, Natalie said hesitantly, did you mean what you said about being a father to my child? His eyes met hers, serious and unwavering. I did, but I know it's too soon after your husband's passing. I wouldn't presume. James would have wanted us to be taken care of, Natalie interrupted softly. He wasn't the jealous type. They stayed like that, connected by the gentle movement beneath their hands, until the baby settled. Finally, Levi helped Natalie to her feet. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow's Sunday. Would you like to ride into town with me for church services?" "If you're feeling up to it," Natalie smiled. "I'd like that very much." The following morning, Levi arrived at the main house with a wagon specially prepared for Natalie's comfort. Extra blankets cushioned the hard wooden seat, and a small footrest had been fashioned to support her legs. Margaret, who had planned to attend services later with Josiah, smiled knowingly as she helped Natalie into a borrowed dress that accommodated her pregnancy. "Mr. Shaw seems quite taken with you," she commented, pinning Natalie's hair into a neat arrangement. "He's been very kind," Natalie replied, attempting to sound neutral despite the warmth spreading through her cheeks. "Kindness is only part of it, my dear. I've known Levi for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Margaret secured the final pin. "There. You look lovely." The journey to Goldfield took less time than Natalie remembered, perhaps because of the pleasant company. Levi spoke more freely than usual, telling her stories of his childhood in Missouri, his journey west after the war, and how he'd come to work for the Blackwells. "My pa fought for the Confederacy," he explained. "Didn't come home. Ma struggled to keep the farm going, but after she and the baby died, there wasn't anything keeping me there." "How old were you?" Natalie asked gently. 15, worked my way west over the next few years, took whatever jobs I could find. Was about to join up with a cattle drive to California when Mr. Blackwell offered me steady work." "And you've been at Silver Dollar ever since?" Levi nodded. 5 years now. Started as a regular hand, worked my way up to foreman last year when old Jefferson retired. Natalie considered this information. "You must be good at what you do. Mr. Blackwell strikes me as a man who doesn't suffer incompetence." Levi's mouth quirked into a smile. "He's fair. Expects a full day's work for a full day's pay. But he treats his men right." Goldfield came into view, its main street bustling with Sunday activity as people made their way to the white steepled church at the town's center. Levi helped Natalie down from the wagon, keeping a steadying hand at her elbow as they walked toward the church. "Levi Shaw, didn't expect to see you in town today," called a voice from across the street. A barrel-chested man with an impressive mustache approached them. "Sheriff Burke," Levi greeted him with a nod. "This is Miss Natalie Moore. She's working up at Silver Dollar." The sheriff tipped his hat to Natalie. "Madam, hope our town's treating you well." "Very well, thank you," Natalie replied. "Miss Moore's interested in the teaching position if the town decides to establish a proper school," Levi added. Sheriff Burke's bushy eyebrows rose. "That's so? Got experience, do you?" "I taught in Boston for 2 years before my marriage." "Well now, that's worth knowing. Town council meets Tuesday next. I'll mention it to Mayor Collins." As they continued toward the church, several other townspeople greeted Levi, each curious about Natalie. She found herself repeating her story several times, but to her surprise, the reactions were largely sympathetic rather than judgmental. "Folks here understand hardship," Levi explained as they took seats in one of the back pews. "Mining town like this, everybody's known loss of some kind." The service was simpler than what Natalie had grown accustomed to in Boston, but there was a sincerity to it that touched her. Pastor Wheeler, a young man with earnest eyes and a powerful voice, preached on compassion and community themes that resonated deeply with Natalie's recent experiences. After the service, they were invited to share lunch at the parsonage with several other congregants. Mrs. Wheeler, a petite woman with a ready smile, took an immediate interest in Natalie. "How far along are you, dear?" she asked, serving Natalie an extra helping of stew. "Nearly 8.5 months now." "And you're staying out at Silver Dollar? That's good. Margaret Blackwell knows more about birthing than most midwives I've met." She lowered her voice. "And between us, I think Goldfield desperately needs a proper teacher. The children exhaust me, and there are more arriving every month with the new mines opening." By the time they left Goldfield in the late afternoon, Natalie felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. The community had welcomed her without the judgment she had feared, and the possibility of a teaching position seemed increasingly real. "Thank you for today," she told Levi as they started back toward the ranch. "It was exactly what I needed." His smile was warm in the golden light of the setting sun. "Glad to hear it. Goldfield's a good town, despite some rough edges." They fell into a comfortable silence as the wagon rolled along the dusty road. Natalie found herself studying Levi's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight bump on the bridge of his nose that suggested it had been broken once, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. It was startling to realize how quickly her feelings for him had developed. James had been gone only 3 months, yet here she was, her heart stirring at the sight of another man. Was it disloyal to her husband's memory? Or was it simply life asserting itself, pushing her forward even as grief tried to hold her back? The questions tumbled in her mind until a sharp pain cut through her thoughts, causing her to gasp and clutch her belly. Levi reined the horses to a halt immediately. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I don't know," Natalie said, breathing through the discomfort. "Just a pain." "Oh!" Another spasm gripped her, stronger than the first. Levi's expression turned to alarm. "Is it the baby? Is it coming?" "I think it might be," Natalie admitted, fear creeping into her voice. "But it's too early. We're still 3 weeks away." "Babies come when they're ready, not when we expect them," Levi said, turning the wagon around with decisive movements. "We're closer to town than the ranch. I'm taking you to Doc Wilson." The return journey to Goldfield was a blur of increasing pain for Natalie. Levi drove as quickly as he dared, constantly glancing at her with worry etched on his features. By the time they reached the doctor's modest house at the edge of town, Natalie's contractions were coming regularly, and her dress was damp with sweat. Doc Wilson answered Levi's urgent knocking in his shirt sleeves, a book in one hand. His demeanor changed instantly when he saw Natalie's condition. "Bring her in," he ordered, already rolling up his sleeves. "When did the pain start?" "About an hour ago," Levi answered, carrying Natalie into the house. "We were on our way back to Silver Dollar from church services." The doctor directed them to a back room equipped as a surgery. "Put her on the bed, then wait outside." Levi hesitated. "I should ride back to the ranch. Let the Blackwells know." "No time," Doc Wilson interrupted, already examining Natalie. "Baby's coming fast. I need you here in case I need an extra pair of hands. Send word with someone else." Reluctantly, Levi stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Through the wood, Natalie could hear him speaking urgently to someone, likely the doctor's assistant, before his footsteps returned. The next hours were the most difficult of Natalie's life. The pain exceeded anything she had imagined, and fear for her child's premature arrival added to her distress. Doc Wilson worked efficiently, his gruff manner giving way to surprising gentleness, as he coached her through the ordeal. Twice Levi was called in to help once to hold Natalie steady, while the doctor administered a tonic for the pain, and again to bring fresh water and linens. Each time, his presence gave her strength, his hands solid and reassuring in hers. As night deepened, Natalie's labor intensified. "Push now," Doc Wilson instructed. "Baby's in position. One good push should do it." Gathering her remaining strength, Natalie bore down. The pressure built to an unbearable peak, then suddenly released in a rush of relief. A moment of silence was followed by the most beautiful sound Natalie had ever heard her baby's first indignant cry. "You have a son," Doc Wilson announced, placing the tiny red-faced infant on Natalie's chest. "Small but strong lungs. That's a good sign." Tears streamed down Natalie's face as she cradled her son. Despite arriving early, he seemed perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a wisp of dark hair like his father's. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You've been eager to join us, haven't you?" A soft knock at the door preceded Levi's hesitant entrance. His eyes widened at the sight of Natalie with the baby. "Come meet him," she invited, her voice hoarse from exertion. Levi approached slowly, as if afraid his presence might somehow disturb the fragile new life. "He's mighty small," he observed, wonder evident in his tone. "But healthy," Doc Wilson assured them, washing his hands in a basin. "Keep him warm, feed him often, and he should thrive." "Have you thought of a name?" Levi asked, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed. Natalie looked down at her son's face, already showing the strong features that had marked his father. "James, for his father," she decided. "James Levi Moore." Levi's head jerked up. surprise clear in his expression. "You're giving him my name?" "If that's all right," Natalie said softly. "You've done more for us than anyone since James died. It seems fitting." Emotion flickered across Levi's features. "I'm honored," he said simply. Doc Wilson cleared his throat. "Mother and baby should rest now. Shaw, you can fetch them back to the ranch tomorrow if all looks well in the morning." But fate had other plans. During the night, a late summer storm blew in from the mountains, bringing heavy rain that turned the roads to mud. By morning, travel to Silver Dollar was impossible for at least a day, possibly two. "Streams will be overflowing their banks," Levi explained after checking the conditions. "Too dangerous to attempt with a newborn." Doc Wilson was unconcerned. "Better they stay here anyway. I want to keep an eye on the little fellow, make sure his early arrival doesn't cause complications." Word had reached the Blackwells through the messenger Levi had sent the previous night. By midday, a ranch hand arrived on horseback with supplies and a note from Margaret expressing her delight at the baby's arrival and assuring Natalie that her position at Silver Dollar was secure whenever she was ready to return. The unexpected confinement created an intimacy between Natalie and Levi that might have taken months to develop otherwise. With nowhere to go and the baby requiring frequent attention, they spent hours together in Doc Wilson's guest room, talking about their pasts, their hopes, and increasingly, their future. "What will you do now?" Levi asked on the second evening, watching as Natalie nursed little James. He had been awkward about such moments at first, but Natalie's practical approach to motherhood had eased his discomfort. "Continue at Silver Dollar until I'm strong enough to work regularly," she replied. "Then perhaps inquire about the teaching position, as Mr. Blackwell suggested." Levi nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And where would you live? In town?" "I suppose so, though the thought of managing alone with James is daunting." She smiled down at her son, who had fallen asleep at her breast. "He's already proving to be a demanding young man. You wouldn't have to manage alone." The words came out in a rush, as if Levi had been holding them back. "I meant what I said before about being a father to your child." Natalie's breath caught. "Levi." "I know it's fast," he continued, standing to pace the small room. "Too fast, maybe. You're still grieving your husband, and now there's the baby, and everything's changed. But the thing is, Natalie, I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you at that station." He stopped pacing, turning to face her directly. "I'm not a wealthy man. I have my wages from Silver Dollar and a small piece of land I've been paying off north of town. It's not much, but it's a start. If you needed time, I'd wait. If you wanted to teach, I'd support that. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration at his own inadequate words evident. "I just want to be part of your lives, yours and James's, if you'll have me." Natalie looked at Levi, really looked at him. In the short time she'd known him, he had shown more integrity, more compassion, and more steadfast support than most men demonstrated in a lifetime. And there was something else, a connection she felt with him that transcended their brief acquaintance, as if some part of her had recognized him from the beginning. "James and I would be fortunate to have you," she said quietly. "But I don't want your charity or your sense of obligation. If we're to have a future together, it has to be because there's something between us that's worth building on." Levi moved to kneel beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. "This isn't charity or obligation, Natalie. What I feel for you is neither of those things." Carefully mindful of the sleeping infant, he took her free hand in his. "I'm asking if you might someday consider me as more than the man who found you at the station. If you might see me as someone worthy of being your husband, as well as a father to James." Tears welled in Natalie's eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of possibility she had thought forever lost to her. "I already do," she whispered. The storm cleared on the third day, allowing them to return to Silver Dollar Ranch. They arrived to a warm welcome, with Margaret taking an immediate grandmotherly interest in little James. She had prepared a cradle in Natalie's room and arranged for lighter duties to accommodate the needs of a new mother. In the weeks that followed, Natalie and James settled into life at the ranch. Levi was a constant presence, stopping by the main house whenever his duties allowed. He displayed a natural affinity with the baby, unafraid to hold him or change him, and seemingly unbothered by the inevitable messes that accompanied infancy. "You're good with him," Natalie observed one evening, as Levi walked the floor with a fussy James, the baby finally settling against his shoulder. "Had some practice with my cousin's young'uns back in Missouri," he replied. "Besides, he's an easy baby to love." Their courtship progressed with the blessing of the Blackwells, who treated Natalie increasingly like the daughter they never had. Josiah made good on his promise to advocate for her with the Goldfield Town Council, and by the time James was 2 months old, Natalie had been offered the position of schoolteacher for the following term. "It's perfect timing," she told Levi, as they walked along Silver Creek one crisp October afternoon, James bundled against her chest. "The school term starts after the new year, when James will be 6 months old. Margaret has offered to watch him during school hours." "Have you decided if you'll take it?" Levi asked, his hand warm around hers. "I think so," Natalie replied. "I've missed teaching, and the salary would allow me to be independent." Levi was quiet for a moment. "You know, my land is about halfway between the ranch and town. I've been saving to build a proper house there." "Oh?" Natalie looked up at him curiously. "It's a nice piece of ground, good water, sheltered from the worst winds, room for a garden, maybe some chickens." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Room for a family to grow." Natalie's heart quickened. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Levi Shaw?" In answer, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a simple gold band. "I had this made in town last week. It's not fancy, but it's solid." His eyes met hers, vulnerable yet hopeful. "I love you, Natalie. I love James like he was my own. I want to be a family, a real family. Will you marry me?" Natalie felt tears well in her eyes as she looked at this man who had transformed her life in such a short time. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Levi's face broke into a brilliant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but that hardly mattered as he pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of James between them, and kissed her for the first time, a kiss filled with promise and the certainty of a shared future. They were married in the Goldfield church 2 weeks later, with the Blackwells standing as witnesses and Pastor Wheeler officiating. Little James, dressed in a christening gown Margaret had sewn, slept peacefully throughout the ceremony, waking only when the congregation's applause marked the conclusion of his parents' vows. The newlyweds spent their first night as husband and wife in a special suite the Blackwells had prepared in the ranch house, with James in his cradle nearby. The intimacy between them, built on friendship and deepening affection rather than mere physical attraction, blossomed naturally into the physical expression of their love. "I never thought I'd find this again," Natalie confessed as they lay together in the quiet darkness. "After James, my first James, died, I thought that part of my life was over." Levi's hand traced gentle patterns on her back. "Life has a way of surprising us. When I left Missouri, I never imagined finding someone like you." Their life together took shape with remarkable ease. Construction on their house began immediately, with Levi and several ranch hands working through November to complete the main structure before the worst of winter set in. It was a modest home by Eastern standards, but solidly built, with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. By Christmas, they were able to move in, though some interior work remained to be completed. Natalie took immense pleasure in creating a home from scratch, applying the domestic skills her mother had insisted she learn alongside her academic education. January brought the start of Natalie's teaching career in Goldfield. The schoolhouse was newly built, a single room with rows of desks and a small attached library. 15 students enrolled initially, ranging in age from 6 to 14 children of miners, merchants, and ranchers from the surrounding area. Natalie thrived in the role, implementing educational methods she had learned in Boston, while adapting to the practical needs of a frontier community. She insisted on teaching not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also literature, science, and history, subjects often considered superfluous in Western schools. These children deserved the same quality of education they would receive in Philadelphia or Boston, she argued, when some parents questioned her approach. They may live in the West, but they should not be limited by it. Her conviction won over even the skeptics, particularly when the children began showing remarkable progress. By spring, enrollment had increased to 22 students, with families from as far as 20 miles away sending their children to Mrs. Shaw's school. Meanwhile, Levi continued his work at Silver Dollar, riding the 5 miles to the ranch each morning and returning in the evenings. The arrangement worked well, with Margaret caring for James during school hours and Natalie taking over when classes ended. On weekends, they often joined the Blackwells for dinner, strengthening the bonds that had become familial in nature. As James approached his first birthday in August of 1877, the tiny family marked another milestone Natalie was expecting again. "Are you sure?" Levi asked when she told him, his face a mixture of delight and concern. "James is still so young." "I'm sure," she replied, smiling at his protective instincts. "And Dr. Wilson says I'm in excellent health. Many families have children close together, you know." Levi pulled her into a gentle embrace. "As long as you're well, that's what matters most." His hand moved to rest on her still flat stomach. "Another little Shaw to join our family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and winter. Natalie continued teaching, with the school board's blessing, until the Christmas break, at which point a substitute, one of the pastor's nieces with some education, took over her classes. Winter that year was particularly harsh, with heavy snowfall and temperatures that plunged well below freezing for weeks at a time. Levi worked tirelessly to ensure their home remained warm and well-provisioned, often breaking trail through deep snow to reach the ranch or town. On a bitterly cold morning in February 1878, with snow piled high around their homestead, Natalie went into labor. Levi had anticipated the possibility of being isolated when her time came and had prepared accordingly. Margaret had moved in 2 weeks prior to assist with the birth, and supplies recommended by Doc Wilson were stockpiled in readiness. The labor was longer than with James, but less frightening for its familiarity. Levi remained by Natalie's side throughout, his steady presence a source of strength as she worked to bring their child into the world. Shortly after midnight, their daughter was born, a robust infant with a shock of dark hair and her father's cleft chin. They named her Elizabeth Margaret Shaw, honoring both Natalie's mother and the woman who had become like a second mother to her. "She's perfect," Levi whispered, cradling his daughter with a tenderness that made Natalie's heart swell. Little James, now 18 months old and curious about everything, peered at his sister from the safety of Margaret's lap. "Baby?" he asked, pointing with a chubby finger. "Yes, sweetheart," Natalie answered. "This is your sister, Elizabeth." "Lisbeth," James declared, unable to manage the full name. The adults laughed, and the nickname stuck Lizzie to most, but always Lisbeth to her brother. Spring brought renewal to more than just the land. With the snow's retreat, Levi expanded their homestead, adding a small barn and corral. He purchased 4 milk cows and a gentle mare for Natalie, fulfilling his promise to build a self-sufficient home. Natalie returned to teaching when Lizzie was 3 months old, arranging her schedule to allow for nursing during the lunch hour when Margaret would bring the baby to the schoolhouse. The arrangement required careful coordination, but the community supported their school teacher's determination to balance motherhood with her professional duties. As the children grew, so did the Shaw family's roots in Nevada. Levi continued working at Silver Dollar Ranch, eventually becoming Josiah Blackwell's right-hand man and unofficial heir to the operation. The older man, having lost his only son in the war, found in Levi the combination of practical skills and integrity he valued most. "You've built something special here," Josiah told them during a Sunday dinner when James was 5 and Lizzie 4. "A family, a homestead, respect in the community. Not many can claim as much after such a short time." Natalie cradling their third child, 2-year-old Thomas. Josiah smiled across the table at her husband. "We've been blessed," she agreed, "though I'm not sure either of us could have imagined this future when we met at Goldfield Station." Levi's eyes met hers, the love between them as palpable as it had been in those early, uncertain days. "I knew," he said quietly. "Not the details, maybe, but I knew you were my future the moment I saw you." In the years that followed, their family continued to flourish. The Shaw homestead expanded to include a small apple orchard and additional acreage for cattle. Natalie's school grew into one of the most respected educational institutions in the region, eventually requiring a larger building and additional teachers. James, showing his mother's aptitude for learning and his adoptive father's practical nature, went on to study law in San Francisco before returning to practice in Nevada. Lizzie, spirited and independent, became one of the first female physicians in the state. Thomas, combining his father's ranching skills with his grandfather Blackwell's business acumen, eventually took over management of Silver Dollar Ranch. Two more children joined the family, Rebecca in 1881 and Daniel in 1884, completing what Natalie often called her unlikely blessing. On warm summer evenings, long after the younger children were in bed, Natalie and Levi often sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the Nevada mountains in shades of gold and purple. In those quiet moments, they sometimes reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, a pregnant widow alone at a train station, and a cowboy whose simple offer of help had changed both their lives immeasurably. "Do you ever regret it?" Natalie asked once, her head resting on Levi's shoulder as they watched a meteor shower streak across the night sky. "Taking responsibility for another man's child? Building a life with a woman you barely knew?" Levi's arm tightened around her. "Not for a single moment," he replied, his voice certain. "James may not have my blood, but he has my heart, same as all our children. And you?" He turned to face her, the lines around his eyes deeper now, but his gaze as warm as ever. "You're the best decision I ever made." As their 20th anniversary approached in the autumn of 1896, Levi surprised Natalie with plans for a journey east, a chance to show their younger children the Boston of her youth, and to visit James, who had established his own family in Philadelphia. "It's time we saw more of the country together," he explained. "We've built our life here, but there's a whole world beyond Nevada we should explore while we still have the energy for it." Natalie agreed readily, though her heart remained firmly anchored to the home and community they had created together. The little house had expanded over the years, its rooms filled with memories of children growing, family gatherings, triumphs, and occasional sorrows. The land around it had flourished under their care, just as they had flourished together. On their last evening before departure, Natalie found Levi at the spot where they had stood 20 years earlier, when he had first shown her the property that would become their home. "Having second thoughts about our journey?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Not at all," he replied. "Just thinking about how different life might have been if I hadn't been in Goldfield that day. If I hadn't seen you sitting alone at that station." Natalie leaned against him, taking in the familiar landscape that had witnessed their love story from its beginning. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," she said. "Some things are simply meant to be." Levi nodded, then turned to her with the smile that still made her heart quicken after all these years. "You know what I told you that first night? That I'd be a father to your child?" "I remember," she said softly. "It was the best promise I ever made." He brushed a strand of silver-streaked hair from her face. "And keeping it has been the greatest joy of my life." As twilight deepened around them, they walked hand in hand back to the house they had built together, a home that had grown from a desperate encounter at a dusty train station into a testament to love's transformative power. Behind them, the Nevada mountains stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, silent witnesses to the remarkable journey of a woman who had arrived pregnant and alone, and the cowboy who had promised to be a father to her child.